feed sounded really fascinating. It sounded really different. It seemed like it was going to address a topic that I think is actually quite important. And it's one of the worst films I've ever seen, not just in terms of the narrative. I'm very narrative driven, so when I watch a film, I really usually need a good narrative. But if there's not a good narrative, but we have interesting characters, it can be okay. The narrative is terrible. The characters are boring, and there are various other aspects of this that are very poorly done. It is exceptionally amateur. I don't think they did a good job of handling the subject matter, and I watched it to the end because if I'm going to discuss it, I will always try and make an effort to watch it all the way through because that's only really fair. But if I wasn't going to review it, I don't think I would have bothered watching it to the end. It is not really watchable. This was released in 2005. It's directed by Leonard. It's written by Kieran Galvin. And I won't go into any spoiler detail just in case you do decide to watch it. But it's about this investigator who is looking into the dark side of the internet where people are hosting websites where they are basically feeding people to death. We have morbidly obese people, one in particular in this film, a character called Deirdre, and we see her being weighed and getting excited in the scene about reaching her new weight goal, and I didn't write it down, but I think she surpassed 600 pounds, and I think that's what they were celebrating. And the investigator is looking at these fetish websites, and it sounds like it could have been a really fascinating look at enablers and feeding websites and the potential that people are taking advantage of people's vulnerabilities and addictions, and at what cost. Because if you're going to keep feeding somebody and they're immobile, it's not going to end very well. And that's, I think, particularly in the age of social media, where we do have a lot of content, particularly on YouTube, of people eating mukbangs for views and, of course, the money that comes with that. And obviously not everybody who's doing mukbangs is overweight, and not everybody who's overweight has an enabler. But I do think that there are parts of the internet where this kind of thing definitely exists. This was released in 2005. I feel like this is even more prevalent today. I could be wrong. I'm not, it's not an area of the internet that I frequent, but just based purely on what we have on YouTube, I imagine there's a lot more out there compared to what there was in 2005. And I think this is a really interesting topic. And if it had been done right, it could have been really good at raising awareness. And I think that would have been really fantastic. And unfortunately, they didn't do anything with the narrative. It was very, very poorly executed. So the narrative was horrendous. The characters were, they were fine. I didn't mind them too much. We have one officer played by Patrick Thompson, another by Matthew Nevez. I apologise if I mispronounced that. And they were fine. I don't have any problems with the characters. But at the same time, they're all very, very boring. The film also feels like it was created by a teenager who has just discovered sex, because we have sex pretty much in every other scene for absolutely no reason. Scenes that don't move the narrative forward, scenes that don't give us great or necessary insight into the characters. It is sex for sex's sake, and this isn't the right film for that. We also have some really clunky editing, some really poor camera work, and some terrible music choices. And I rarely notice the music in films. I don't listen to a lot of music unless it's an actual musical. I don't necessarily hear the music, if that makes sense. It's not something I'm that tuned into. So when I'm noticing that it's not good, that's a sign to me that it's really standing out as being really jarring. And then we have some really awkward editing and a really poor narrative. It's horrendous. It's a terrible, terrible experience. And I don't recommend it at all. I do think praise is deserved for addressing a topic that I think is certainly then not that known about. As I said, with YouTube being as prevalent as it is, I feel like this kind of thing is becoming, unfortunately, more well known. But in 2005, I doubt I ever would have heard of this kind of thing. So I think they did a good job in saying, hey, this thing might happen. But unfortunately, it's not a watchable experience for multiple reasons, not just the handling of the narrative. On the one hand, I'm disappointed because I did think it sounded like it would be a really fascinating experience. But on the other, I had no reason to have high hopes. I hadn't heard anything about it. I didn't read any reviews before watching it. I just read the description and thought, this sounds like it could be interesting. I had no idea in my head how it would play out, so I was keen to find out. So I gave it a go and bought the DVD. And do I regret buying it? I mean, not necessarily, because I did want to watch it, but I could have used that time to watch something else. Credit to them for addressing a topic that I think is quite important, but unfortunately, it's not a good film.